My name is Lloyd Borrell. I'm your host. Today, I'm thrilled to have as my guest Nick Pino. Nick Pino is an investigative health journalist, educator, and advocate for safe technologies. He's published over 1,500 health articles online, and he's the author of the Non-Tinfoil Guide to EMFs, an unconventional book endorsed by alternative health authorities. You can find out more about Nick's work at the website emfbook.com. Nick Pino, welcome to the EMF Health Summit.
Hey, Lloyd. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited for this project you've put together.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and thanks for participating today.
Sure.
So you're a health journalist, and right. There's so many important things going on in the world. I think we both agree. There's so many things you could have written about, GMOs, chemtrails, vaccines. Why electromagnetic fields? Why EMFs? Why did you choose to focus on that?
I don't quite know, Lloyd, to be perfectly honest. It kind of fell on my lap. And once I read Deborah Davis' book, Disconnect, which is amazing, a mandatory read for anyone listening to this who wants to go deeper, I just found it very fascinating. And it just convinced me a little bit, oh my God, it's actually extremely credible. Deborah Davis has been involved in the world of cancer epidemiology or chemicals. I don't quite remember, but she has such a vast background working with the NIH, working with authorities that is, you can get more conventional than that. She's extremely credible, her entire work for decades. And I said, if a scientist like Deborah says that, it must be true unless she's completely mistaken or something. I must be missing something here. So I went deeper and deeper, and then I talked to the average person in health, and no one seemed to know what I was talking about. So I figured, oh my God, this is an important topic because almost every human being on this planet right now is having a cell phone in their hand and using this technology. And if you choose not to have a cell phone, you're exposed to overall electrosmog, electropollution, which is a term I love, electrosmog, because people understand, well, it's not just your use, it's everyone is polluting the air with these EMFs. And the question is, does it have consequences on your health? And if you listen to any other interview, I'm sure you know by now that the answer is unfortunately yes, it's impacting our health. And we need to look at it. So it's really what got me into the whole thing. The problem that I found personally is it was hard to understand. And I mean, I'm passionate about health. I listen to, 100 different podcast episodes per month. It's nonstop research. And even I, with my expertise, years of writing about health, various health topics as a health journalist, I found it extremely hard to grasp. Magnetic fields, electric fields, dirty electricity. And I was lost at most points. So I decided to organize my knowledge in a document. And eventually I realized, okay, I should probably get a book going because I was looking for a new project. And I put together the Non-Tinfoil Guide to EMFs, which is my version of the story in a very condensed manner, and also with my style, which is humor and basically common sense, trying to say exactly, walk people through the issue and remove the fluff and say, do you really think this makes sense that we're not looking at it? And I didn't get so far one person reading my book that says, Nick, you're completely wrong. Literally no one from the industry. I don't have haters right now, it surprised me after it's been almost a year since I published the first ebook. And no one has written to me to tell me I read everything, I fact checked you, and this is not an issue. So it looks like it is.
It looks like it is. And it's very true what you say here, because electromagnetic fields is complex. Mm-hmm. Health is complex. But when you put the two together, it's like, whoa, what is going on?
It's mind-blowing.
This is really the interesting thing, and this is one of the things that I've realized ever more in doing this summit, is that nobody has a complete understanding of this. I have my own understanding, which came from what I was experiencing And really, that's the most important thing. I understood it from a non-intellectual viewpoint. So I didn't read books and stuff. This thing just came at me full on one day. And then you've got people who research it, and then you've got doctors who are looking at how it impacts health. You've got the building biologists who are looking, taking measurements and so on, who are looking, at the exposure levels. And there's all these different aspects to this question. So it is very complex. And the question that comes back time and time again is the cancer question, isn't it? Because it's like the cancer question is the big question of our times. Does not necessarily cell phone radiation cause cancer, but just the whole, is cancer linked to this, to smoking, to, this kind of discipline or not, or, doing too much of sport, or I don't know. It's so many things can be linked to cancer. So cancer is super important. And yet, I think on this EMF question, it's perhaps not what we should be focusing on. Not to say it's not important, but I just want to talk about, if we can today, focus on a little bit this aspect of premature aging, because that's important too, isn't it? I mean, premature aging, the ramifications of that. If EMFs are contributing significantly, or even not significantly, but if they're contributing to premature aging, just that in itself is massive in terms of its social, economic impact on a civilized world. So could we talk about that in terms of the science, notably? What you can say about that?
Sure. Well, the first thing that skeptics could say listening to this interview, premature aging, if our new use of cell phone causes us to age faster, how come the population is actually older than ever? Because our lifespan increases, right? Well, the lifespan increases, but at the same time, it's a very bizarre thing in our society these days. The health span, how many years you have in good health with your entire head without cancer, is decreasing rapidly, because we know people now in their 60s, even in their 50s now, have dementia or early on signs of Alzheimer's. It's really epidemic. So this is really what I will talk about when I talk about premature aging. Is premature aging of your health, right? So on a cellular level, Dr. Martin Pall, Pall, has looked at exactly the mechanisms that could explain how is it that these signals in the environment impact the human cell, because it's very important. We don't want to just stay in theory. And sure, if someone says, I'm holding a cell phone, I feel a headache, I feel this and that, it does have a meaning. But on a scientific standpoint, we must kind of understand what is happening on the cellular level. And it turns out that these EMFs will activate a calcium channel inside the cell, and it will say to the little gates at the opening of the cell, the cell's calcium channel, this voltage gated calcium channel, it will say stay open because it's voltage gated, right? So imagine there's a sensor on these little garage door inside your cell, and normally it keeps opening and closing depending on the demand, how much calcium goes into the cell and outside the cell. And normally outside the cell you have a ton of calcium, and inside a little bit, very few calcium makes it into the cell for different biological reasons we don't have to get into. What happens is that these EMFs is essentially electricity in the air, electromagnetic fields. It has an electric and a magnetic component. So imagine if you could see the air right now and you had electromagnetic capabilities in your eyes, just like some certain animals can see infrared heat, right? You would see electricity sparks in the air right now. Even here where I'm standing, even though I use Ethernet, there's Wi-Fi in the air. So this electricity, it basically keeps the garage door open. It's stuck open, and then the calcium flows in and flows in and flows in. And this entire thing, in a very simple terms, causes oxidative damage inside the cell. So the cell will prematurely get damaged and has to repair. Not necessarily a problem, because a lot of things cause oxidative damage in our environment, Lloyd. Sometimes it can be UV rays. Doesn't mean you shouldn't get your vitamin D, right? So it's not necessarily something harmful, just oxidative stress in itself. But over time, when you multiply this times the exposure and the tremendous increase in microwave radiation in our environment from cell phones, for example, which is a quintillion times what it used to be a few decades ago. And for people who are like, oh, wait a minute, that's a number. It's 10 to the 18th. 10 with 18 zeros after it. That's a lot. So these cells don't know what's happening. There's electricity around. I'm trying to sense what is happening. There's electricity around, and all the VGCCs, these calcium channels, stay open, and then the calcium keeps flowing in and in and in, as long as you're keeping your body, your cells, in a Wi-Fi environment, in a cell phone environment. Well, let me ask you something. Is there really a non-Wi-Fi, an EMF-free environment anymore? It's very hard. Even in the countryside, you can find cell phone towers. You can find background levels that are elevated. So a lot of people, I live in a city. I stay in a high EMF environment 24/7. So I'm under stress. So everything that this causes on a cellular standpoint is basically damaging my cells prematurely. And what also is seen in research is that, well, when you have oxidative stress inside the cell, you have a response that is, well, we need more antioxidants. So the body's natural response to this is to have SOD, superoxide dismutase, glutathione, so different natural endogenous. So it means your own body creates its own antioxidant. I'm not talking about eating acai berries or blueberries. You have internal defenses against offenders, but then they get depleted as well. So when you look at the research, constantly EMF exposure over time, you don't get as much SOD production, you don't get as much glutathione, and eventually the tank runs on empty. So what's happening is that we are seeing people, and I think it's critical that you understand, if you stay in a city right now, it does not mean you'll get sick automatically, but it does mean that every day you spend in this environment on a cellular level, even if you're a Zen Buddhist, even if you don't own a cell phone, even if you eat healthy, even if you move healthy, you are getting stressed on a biological standpoint more than someone who is not exposed to these levels of EMFs outside the city. So that's something to keep in mind. This is why people in a city, by default, you're starting with a disadvantage, right? So, of course, you want to take care of your own exposure, and we'll get into that, how to mitigate your own cell phone and all these things. But you got to stay aware that, okay, I live in a city. By default, I start with a big weight on my shoulders that is aging me faster. It is harder to be healthy in a city or near these sources of EMF. That's a way I can put it extremely simply. There's also something I have to mention, which is, well, EMFs disrupt sleep. So, of course, the link is very easy to make here. If you sleep less or of less quality, of course, you don't recuperate as much from a workout. You don't recuperate as much from your role as a new dad like me, or as an entrepreneur like you, Lloyd, and same thing for me. Everything that you do is harder when you don't have restorative sleep. So, of course, this ages you faster. If I told you now you can sleep all you want, 12 hours a day, I'm sure after 2 months, people will say, oh my God, Lloyd, you look 5 years younger. Of course, you're restored, your skin will get better, your energy will be much better, your workouts will be easier to recover from. So good health is linked to good sleep, and EMFs directly impact the quality of your sleep.
Yeah. And it's obviously we're generalizing city and and non-urban setting, countryside setting.
Sure.
Saying that, but yeah, I mean, I totally get what you're saying, because there can be situations where living in a non-urban setting, we can have other issues. For instance, people who are living around fields, pesticides and so on, depending on what.
Exactly.
But yeah, on an EMF question generally, and again, maybe you live in an urban setting, but there's a military radar around the corner, But generally, the city, from an EMF perspective, is less healthy. There's higher exposures than in a non-urban setting. And I want to ask you about, because the telecoms industry, the utility companies, they're trying to put the onus on us, good people, because the good guys and the bad guys, and we're the good guys. They're trying to put the onus, and we're trying to tell the truth anyway. That's the way I see it. Just tell the truth. But they're trying to put the onus on us having to prove that EMFs are dangerous, right? But what if we turn the tables on that and say, well, how can we disprove the assumption that EMFs are definitely safe? Can you talk to that notion?
Sure. Well, if EMFs were completely safe, I saw a presentation lately by someone from the industry who was talking about 5G, and it's not the industry's responsibility to look at health effects and research. The way our society is organized as US free country, Canada free country, free market, you market something, and if it has followed certain rules by the FCC, by the FDA, and it passes the rule, then you're allowed to put the technology out. So the blame on industry can be, yes, we can be a little bit angry, but it's not necessarily their deal. So this industry person said, the problem I have is, they said, all the evidence in the last 50 years points towards the fact that there is no health effect whatsoever in children and adults alike. There's nothing. That's not true. That's ridiculous. So that's this was written out black and white in a PowerPoint, and I'm like, this is not accurate. So to disprove the assumption that they're safe, let's find one study that says that they're not. There are thousands and thousands and thousands. So we can argue on different points. We could say, oh, is it clear? Is it definitive that they cause cancer? We could say no, yes, I don't agree, this study, that study. But is it completely safe and it does nothing? No, that's not a scientific thing to do. That's not a rational thing to do, and I think it's a very irresponsible thing to do. So even the industry is somehow very permissive in what they say, because that's not necessarily what the FCC or what the World Health Organization would say. If you ask the World Health Organization, are EMFs completely safe? They say no. They say, well, it is a probable class 2B probable carcinogen, or possible class 2B. And eventually it should even become a probable class 2A carcinogen. Chances are that is going to happen within a few years. So is it safe? Well, they say it's more complicated than that. And people love black and white, right? What does that mean, possible carcinogen? I want to know, is it not? It's not how public policy works, unfortunately. So they looked at studies, right, on is it carcinogen, is it not? Some say yes, some say no. Then their interpretation of what we should do when we look at this data is probably we should be cautious. They recommended a few things. Don't hold a cell phone next to your head. But they recommend these things, and then it's up to the governments to follow these recommendations on a precautionary principle guideline. No one does that. And then the users, oh yeah, by the way, if you feel that maybe your cell phone exposure might be a problem, stop using a cell phone next to your head. No one does it. Stop putting a cell phone next to your body. No one does it. So people don't have the time to look at this information. So it's kind of, I think, giving
time or the inclination.
The inclination, it's convenient. It's very inconvenient to stop using your cell phone. It's bizarre because the technology is known to not be 100% safe, but then, and even in the fine print, is don't hold that thing next to your body. Keep it at a short distance to respect the as tested radiation levels, which isn't true, because when you look at what's happening with the PhoneGate scandal, that's another thing that's happening anyway. So the levels are way higher. So everything that I told you, it disproves that they're completely safe. But let's look at a recent study. I want to say just one study, the NTP study. The NTP study from the National Toxicology Program. I'm sure other speakers will chat about it. It's a recent study, and the early results were revealed in 2016 because the researchers were so concerned that there was clear evidence that EMFs, just ambient EMFs, or the equivalent of 30 minutes per day for 36 years in human equivalent, caused various tumors in rats and mice, especially of the heart. And these are schwannomas. So these are tumors of the nervous system, let's put it this way, which is what is seen in people that are sensitive, nervous system problems. Well, this study then, just a few months back in 2018, a peer-reviewed process. So they looked, scientists got together with industry members, with scientists of the highest level, and they said, okay, are these results good, or are they like, basically it's a peer-reviewed process. So they have the harshest comments, or let's say they look at the evidence very hard in a very factual way, and they try to find problems in the study design. They try to find problems in the conclusions. They found problems, Lloyd. But what problems did they find? They found that the researchers underestimated their conclusions. So they raised most of the conclusions of how much of a carcinogen are EMF. So for example, when it comes to, how is it likely that rats got schwannomas in this or that situation, in the male group, in the female group? And basically they said, oh no, researchers are wrong. It's actually worse than you thought. And what they said for one tumor type, the schwannomas, I think it's schwannomas of the heart, I can't remember, but they said this is clear evidence of EMFs being a carcinogen. So World Health Organization says, it could be a possible. Well, NTP says clear evidence that this increases. So that's class 1 definite carcinogen in certain situations. So all of this says, well, it disproves the assumption that they're safe. This is happening. This is a study financed by the U.S. government. This is not some fringe group. This is very recent, not some old study that we can say, it's not valid anymore. This has been peer-reviewed process. There's nothing against it. It is definitive. No one in the industry, I didn't hear one come back from people that say, oh, no, it's not accurate. The peer review process has been done and it does something. So we cannot say anymore that these things are perfectly safe. It will be ludicrous at that point. Then we can argue how dangerous they are. Sure, we can. But we got to talk about how dangerous they are, what level should be at, but not the fact that they're perfectly safe. That's ludicrous.
And the question that begs there, from what you're saying, is why are these researchers underestimating or understating these effects? Why aren't they telling the truth?
Louis Slezen has looked at that, and he has a great article. He's the health journalist, with just 3 or 4 decades more experience than me in the topic. So I bow down at his information. He's incredible, and he has commented tremendously on his blog microwavenews.com about that. And he says that it's a very bizarre situation. He doesn't know exactly why they've been, the tone has changed, and they've kind of underplayed things a little bit. Maybe there's political pressure. Maybe there's lobbying pressure. It's obvious that this is happening. If I were the industry, I would be worried about this study, because it's one of the strongest on the planet right now, strongest findings. And even the Ramazzini Foundation in Italy found similar things in a similar study, reinforcing these results, and that was it just in latest March, and the final study results will be out maybe by the time this talk is published. Yeah. So these things are just mounting, and hopefully it will be in the news, because it's important. You're listening to this, like, people don't understand, Lloyd. When I tell them these things, why is this not in the news? And the truth is, there's a lot of political pressure, of industry pressure, and advertisements that the TV is driven by telecoms that or part of their publicity or ad revenue comes from telecom advertisers. So it's a very hard thing to live with as an editor of a journal or TV station to say, yes, we're going to have this news about that completely kind of puts the Verizon product in a bad name. It's a complicated issue, and it's not talked about very often in the mainstream media.
One of the things to situate me, my perspective on life and how I live, my philosophy is that I say to people that I'm very law-abiding, that I mean, I'm not perfect. I'm not trying to say I'm, that I'm totally perfect and perfect husband and perfect father and perfect person. But so I've never had a speeding ticket. I've never had in my name anyway. Actually, long story, but my wife I came through on my name, but actually she that was driving once. So I've never had a speeding ticket. I've never had a parking ticket. I'm very law-abiding. My father was in the police force voluntary, though I'm not saying I'm into that either. But what I'm saying is that I'm somebody who just, for years, really up to the age of 35, when this all hit me, was just accepting what I saw in the news and, read in the newspapers and so on. And then when this started happening, that was the thing, and that's why I started my website, Electric Sense, was because I couldn't believe that I was like, come on, people, you need to know about this. Yeah. And for me, honestly, I was pissed off, to excuse my French, at the time, and got quite, some kind of anger thing going on, because I felt very disappointed and let down by this system that I believed in, because I wasn't being told the truth. So, and now, obviously, I've become much more skeptical, because I've every reason to be, and there is no doubt in my mind that this information is being manipulated. I know you didn't say that word, but there is no doubt that this is not something that I want to focus on either, because it's really important that we help people. But people do need to know the truth. And the same as there was a manipulation with the tobacco companies, with Big Tobacco, which Dr. Davis covered, then we've got a similar manipulation, a yet more powerful manipulation, I'm sure, collusion going on of this whole thing. It's all been stage managed, this whole EMF thing. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to stage manage it. And yet it's worse. It's worse because you can't even compare it to tobacco and the effects on us. Because, for instance, tobacco, you don't smoke and you go in your bedroom and you can have a good night's sleep in no smoke. But with EMFs, you go in your bedroom and we're all being zapped by EMFs 24/7 pretty well. So there is no comparison. There is very clearly some manipulation going on by certain parties, and people do need to know the truth. So that's why it's so important to get this message out. And clearly we've got the same vision on this, and it's just about telling the truth. When you're telling the truth, then, because people say to me, well, you're an expert on EMFs. I said, well, no, actually, I'm an expert on my own health, and I know quite a bit about EMFs, but I don't consider myself, I've got no formal training, and it's just really, I've got really passionate about it because it's something very clearly wrong, and very clearly, people do need to know about this. But, you've delved into this topic very significantly. You really brought a lot of clarity, I think, to this topic, and you have a good understanding of it. And I want to just, say to you, so it's like 12 months since your book came out. What's the most important thing that you've learned in the last 12 months that you want to share with us?
I would say that using an EMF meter, a very basic one, might be the most important thing. For me, it's the thing that sparked me into writing the book. As I just started the first chapters and very factual things, I got that meter and I started understanding, oh my God, this, for example, my Xbox is constantly emitting Wi-Fi. And I discovered that even when I turn it off, it's still emitting Wi-Fi, and the machine appears to be turned off, and yet there's a strong signal. And I couldn't understand it, Lloyd. I was like, oh my God, this means that it's wasting my electricity, it's costing me money, and on top of that, it's exposing me to this radiation. But for what? I don't want this radiation. So you literally have to unplug it. And this is the case with most Microsoft gaming consoles, with PlayStations. And the only way that I'm able to tell that is if I have a basic EMF meter to see the light go up and to say, oh my God, it's still emitting. Same thing in a car. Sometimes you realize that the Bluetooth function, even if it's turned off, it's still looking for a phone. You discover all sorts of things, and you discover that we're on a junk food diet of EMFs in our society because it's thought as completely safe, right? This idea that has been disproven by now. The technology has been developed. Oh, let's keep it open just in case. I don't know. Like, the engineers don't care. They don't have this requirement to turn off their emitting antenna or receiver or transmitter when it's not in use, which is ridiculous. So the technology is built extremely poorly. And also I discovered that once you start talking about it, if people want to get on board, it creates a fear response. It creates like, oh my God, this is the first thing that they tell me, Nick, well, Wi-Fi is everywhere, so why bother? Right? It's everywhere. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm bathing. I'm getting zapped. And they, when they focus on that, they're like, oh, okay, well, it's ridiculous even talking about it because it's ubiquitous and it's not my responsibility. Well, there's a lot you can do about it. Sure, there's background exposures, there's exposure that you cannot avoid, but there's the one that you can avoid. And part of what you can do is, of course, handle your own devices. But once you have an EMF meter, sometimes you find out that, oh, well, this is a hot spot. And you might find out that their neighbor has found a good idea to maybe put their Wi-Fi router on the other side of the wall right next to your bedroom, and you discover that this happened 2 months ago, and you discover that 2 months ago your sleep has gone sour. Oh, wait a minute, maybe it's the Wi-Fi, and you can agree with your neighbor then to have it turned off at night. You only discover these things if you have an EMF meter, because these are your eyes for electromagnetic radiation. And I think this gives actually more hope and more sense of empowerment for most people that get a basic meter, because sometimes you see a cell phone tower in the horizon and you're like, oh my God, I'm getting blasted. And you have a meter and there's nothing. So it turns out the antenna is completely shooting maybe a directional beam in the other direction, but you don't know because, I mean, I don't know. I don't know the technology. I don't know how these antennas are designed. So instead of just living in fear and saying, oh my God, everything is dark, you actually can see, okay, what is the portrait? It's like looking at your diet and looking at all these foods on the table. Okay, what am I eating right now? And then saying, okay, well, this thing I can maybe eat less of, these veggies I could eat more of. Then you feel empowered. You're like, okay, well, I'm gonna handle this thing. So this EMF meter really made such a difference in my life. And and each time that someone else, I want to teach them about EMF. When I show them the exposures, look, this computer is emitting something because the Wi-Fi is on. It makes it real, or else they don't see the signal, and they have never paused for a second in their life and considered that even just the Wi-Fi icon means there's a signal that goes somewhere else. They haven't thought about this because it's invisible.
Mm. Yeah, and seeing is believing, and having an EMF meter really is an eye-opener. And it's so important to get the right meter also, because not getting the right meter is a waste of money and a big waste of time, because
confusing.
Big time confusing, and you think you're safe and you're not, and no matter what meter you get, it will not be as sensitive as you are. That's to say, even though you cannot, so you've got people that are electrically hypersensitive that can feel these frequencies, which is what I was once experiencing, and then you've got everybody who is electrically sensitive, in the sense that we're all being impacted by these frequencies. So we're all sensitive to these frequencies. So no matter what meter you buy, even the most expensive meter costing tens of thousands of dollars, it will not be as sensitive as you are. And there's a lot of great meters out there now. It's really evolving, really fast. The Cornet meters, Alpha Labs with the Tri-Field meters, the Meter Age, Acousticom, Acoustimeter, Acousticom 2. What's your choice? What was the meter, or what was the meter that did it for you?
The meter that I talked about in my book that I have the most experience with is the Cornet ED88T. Now there's the Plus version that is out. However, now that I have more experience, there's a new meter that just launched sooner this year that's called the RD10. Like Rodney Dennis 10, RD10, and it's sold by radmeters.com. I don't know if it's sold from other places, but I think the owner designed it, and it is actually the engineer that created it. It's extremely simple. I find, Lloyd, that even for high-level health practitioner, this is the number one meter that I will be recommended in a course that I put together on EMLs, because it is what we could call the sweeping meter. Instead of an engineer meter. The Cornet gives you the numbers. You can look at the numbers and then the charts. And for someone that is, I could call myself a health geek, or I have a strong interest in that, it is worth it to have the Cornet. You see the spikes. You can analyze. I take notes. I take pleasure in these things. But it's pretty much like counting calories, analyzing maybe the micronutrient. Instead of just looking at the bananas and avocados on the table, I would say, bananas has a mix of vitamin K and potassium and this. But the average person would say, Nick, that's like, just tell me what to eat. It's too much, right, already. So it's the same thing. You can get overly complicated with a meter, but the RD10 is just a sweeping meter. You have three functions. You have the radio frequency. You have the magnetic fields, electrical fields. It is very accurate for its use. So it will not give you the precise number. It will give you a range. You can sweep your environment. You can discover that your Xbox has been emitting easily. You will see the lights go up. You can discover that there's a hot spot. The lights will go up. You can travel with it because it is extremely tiny. And I think as a beginning meter, it might be the easiest one to understand, probably with the TF2 from Alpha Lab, the Tri-Field TF2. But I prefer it because it is very, very, very simple. You just take it out, you sweep around, and you don't have to think about it too much. Then if you want to analyze the numbers, you can get a little bit more advanced with it, look at the building biology guidelines and this and that. But for the average person, I think it's the perfect tool to get started with.
Yeah, and it's a dinky little thing as well.
It's very tiny.
Got surprising functionality. But I want to ask you about solutions in a very broad sense,
Sure.
because there are solutions, and that's the thing is, when the light bulb first goes on about EMFs and just how dangerous they are, then often people are in a state of overwhelm, and sometimes that kind of backfires in that they don't really do anything. So what we need is some simple steps that people can take, and that's what I want to ask you. So if you could give like your top 3 tips for EMF mitigation, what would they be?
Sure. The number one is keep devices 1 foot from the body. So any or any EMF source for that matter. So, and what I mean by EMF source, a source of wireless radiation. So think about it. If something can be connected wirelessly, if it's a phone, a tablet, a laptop, even in that case, I would recommend any smart device. And even, yes, I'm not a fan of Apple Watches because, again, you have a source of radiation that's very close to your body. And the more you create distance from your body, the better off you'll be. So I'm a fan of just saying, okay, the 1 foot rule. If you follow that, well, you discover quickly that if I put my cell phone in my pocket when I carry it, even though I'm not talking, I am not following this 1 foot rule. So make sure to hit airplane mode, for example, to make sure it's not emitting before putting it on your body. So just this simple rule, I think it eliminates a lot of the acute effects. So whether it's the acute effects of your cell phone on fertility for men and women alike, by the way, or the acute effects on cancer risk. If you're a woman, putting it in a bra, very bad idea. But then if you put it near your head, well, you have other cancers here. Like, where do you want cancer is pretty much the question, or where do you want cancer risks, to be more precise. So you don't want any cancer risk, so don't put the device there. If you're a woman, you can put it in your bag, but if the bag is right next to you, put it in airplane mode. So there are things you can do. So just with this device, it makes a huge difference. So if you're having this iPad at home for your children, and hopefully you don't overdo it and keep them hours a day in front of the screens too, because that's a whole nother discussion. But you hand an iPad, make sure it's on airplane mode, because of course, try to teach a toddler that you should create a distance of 1 foot. They will stick it. They will hold it like a teddy bear. So you want to make sure that it's not emitting this radiation if you're going to hand it to an infant that doesn't have the ability to follow these rules. When it comes to more strong things like routers, that would be my rule number 2. The router at home, the wireless router, is a strong source of radiation that I see misplaced very, very often, Lloyd. So sometimes I saw a couple put it under their bed. And it wasn't their choice. It was a choice maybe of the IT person that came at home to install the new router, and they thought, oh, it's the most convenient place. There's the cable is there. Something very stupid like this, something very innocent. So you want this wireless router, if you choose to have wireless. Of course, the best choice is no Wi-Fi at home. That's my choice right now, and I'm super proud because I have a 2-month-old at home, and I'm very concerned about the effects on his growth. And the Wi-Fi router is right there in the middle of my living room. And even if I try to shield it and this and that, there's still radiation in the air. I don't feel comfortable doing that. He's spending all day in the living room, right? So the wireless router, you want it as far away from living areas as possible. So it means a corner in the garage. And you want it to reduce the power it emits to the minimum possible so that you have good connectivity, or like decent connectivity, so you don't have to ask for the 150 Mbps connection, like the super fast thing, and pay a bunch of money for it. You can ask for the minimum possible from your IT or telecom provider, and test if this is sufficient. We have 30 Mbps, and with the Wi-Fi, it was even too strong. I could be on 5 Mbps and be okay. It's a small apartment. So people see the highest one, 100 Mbps. Well, generally, the higher you can have bandwidth, the higher your speed of internet at home, the higher the radiation. So that Wi-Fi router is a hot potato. You gotta get it away from your body, away from living areas, and then turn it off at night, because there's no need to have radiation at night. And it will, even if it's a couple of rooms from where you sleep, it will increase the levels in the air. Because let's face it, if you're in your bedroom at night and you read the newspaper on your iPad, like you see a lot of people doing, well, you're connecting with the Wi-Fi. So it means radiation is there. If you can connect to it, it's there. It's in the air 24/7. And if you just turn off your iPad, it is still there in the air. So turn off the Wi-Fi router, put it on a timer, a Christmas light timer, an outlet timer, so that way it will do so automatically, or just go wired and wire everything in your home. It's way better, and we have chosen to do that. And luckily, my wife Genevieve is now completely on board, and we have a wire for her computer, we have a wire for my computer, and it's all over the place, but we deal with it because we know it's good for our children's health. The number 3 I would do, because it's so easy and underrated and it costs $0, is to turn off the circuit breakers at night. Because a type of EMF that has been around for a while, but not for our ancestors, is electrical fields. So just simply having electricity in the walls in the form of electrical fields can reduce your sleep. And that's something very surprising for people. They say, well, I don't use a cell phone. Why are you saying now electricity is harmful? Well, it's nothing natural. When you sleep in the middle of the forest, usually people feel better for a lot of reasons, but one of them is that you're not surrounded by electricity. And electricity, even if it's in the walls, it actually irradiates from the walls in the form of electrical fields, and you get what we could say is a low-level electric shock that you cannot feel again, but that is disrupting your sleep. So most people just start turning off breakers at night, especially to their bedroom. And if you work with a building biologist, maybe you have other breakers at home that go under your bed, or because there are several circuits. But just start with the bedroom and see how you feel. A lot of people tell me, oh my God, I sleep better with electricity off. Well, of course. And then it also discourages you to use bedside lamps and electronics, and maybe to recharge your cell phone at night, which are all practices that can increase your EMF exposure from electricity, from magnetic fields. So if you turn off electricity, you remove these problems as well. So no devices, no electricity, and certainly no Wi-Fi router in the bedroom. And just this trifecta right there, I think it creates for better sleep and for a great way to start handling EMFs in your environment, sleeping better and recovering better from your exposures, which you cannot control.
Yeah, great tips. And also you'll notice people that are watching, inexpensive tips. Needs a bit of effort, not that much, but a bit of effort, and you don't have to go the whole 9 yards straight away. You can just do one tip at a time. And you can start with the putting the timer or switching off your Wi-Fi router, and then you can buy the timer, which costs next to nothing, $10, whatever. And then you can eventually go hardwired if you can get your wife on board, or your husband. It's usually the other way around, isn't it? Because that's the other thing, is that it tends to be more women, certainly, that are aware of this issue. And there's and even when you look at the studies, the early studies in Sweden, it was more about the women than men. So there is something that seems to be going on there as well. But women are more keyed into this whole thing, certainly. But I just want to touch on something that you said there about building biologists. So we can do all these things, can't we, ourselves? And I'm a great one for empowerment. And this is really all about empowerment, ultimately, this whole thing. Because where I live at the moment, they're wanting to introduce smart meter for the electricity, the Linky, and Gazprom, the gas people. They're wanting to put the wireless gas meter on. Yeah. So we've got the same issues all over the world. And so it is about, well, you taking a stand. And I'm not a big one for... as I say, I'm very law-abiding, and so I talk about EMFs on the internet and stuff, but I'm not really one to get on the soapbox generally. But here, I'm taking a stand because obviously I understand what this all means, and I do not want these frequencies. I do not want to be polluted anymore by these frequencies. And so there are means and ways, registered letters, so on. And Josh Del Sol, for instance, in the US, has got a movement and a process for doing this, and other smart meter groups have also. So I think this whole empowerment thing is super important, and having the meters is part of this empowerment process. And it's just a question of saying, well, yeah, okay, maybe the powers that be, maybe the government don't know everything there is to know about what's best for me in terms of my health. And you mentioned building biologists there. So just a quick word on that. So to go further, you can get the meter, or you can get an expert in to take some readings for you. Do you just want to talk to that for a sec?
Sure. Well, building biologist or there's a second certification that has started from Austria and that is now becoming a little bit more known. Is called GeoVital consultants, which are also a type of building biology. I must say, it's just a different approach. Both are good, and some people are also called EMF consultants and do their own thing. That could be great, and some of them are not accredited to the same people, but do look for reviews to judge their work and not necessarily their papers. But these experts are usually have an engineer background or engineer mind and will come with professional grade meters looking at the entire electromagnetic spectrum in your environment. And a building biologist, if they're through the institute from they're accredited through the Institute of Building Biology and Ecology, will also address some of them, the air quality, water quality, and mold. So it can be more than just EMFs. They will help you create a healthy living environment at home overall. What they can do is sweep your home, look for hotspots, and give you the ease of mind. If you're concerned, oh, I'm living near a power line, is that far enough? That's a question I get. Well, I don't necessarily know if it's far enough. They will know. They will have meters that are precise enough, and you can feel you can have better ease of mind than if you take your own meter and sweep around. If you use the RD10, like I told you, it's a sweeping meter, so it means you can pinpoint anomalies. Sometimes you can fix anomalies. For example, finding, oh, my Wi-Fi router is way too close to my bedroom. I move it away. The levels go down. I feel better. But sometimes if it's outside exposure, well, what do we do about it? Maybe I should install shielding curtains, advanced things like that, which you don't necessarily have the expertise to do, sometimes can do more harm than good. Some people install entire shielding jobs, and building biologists coming afterwards realize that the levels of EMS are higher because there's a hole in the shielding, and now it creates a whole mess. So if it's pretty much like having, I think in certain situations, it's better to have a professional. I think, for example, you can go only so far taking supplements left and right, but sometimes you need a functional medicine practitioner of some kind, a health coach or a doctor that has a holistic approach or something like that to help you find, okay, well, which one of these supplements would be the best bang for your buck. So you can shed $500, $5,000 on a bunch of different supplements, but sometimes you end up wasting your money a little bit because you're kind of doing trial and error. It's the same way. Sometimes you can start investing in a shielding job and in different things and taking supplements because you feel ill, but it turns out that just a building biology consultation could save you a bunch of work, of trial and error. So this is really why I recommend it to everyone. I think that everyone should have a professional assess their home and look at it, especially every couple of years as the portrait changes. And if you're concerned, you can have them come back for a short consult. Maybe there's a cell phone tower being installed. You want to know if there's an impact on the environment. You want to know if your kids are exposed when they play at the park. Well, all these things they can help with. And it's very important that we encourage and spread the word about their work, because there aren't enough building biologists around the world for the demand, and we do need to spread the word. It's very important work that they do, and I think we should rely on them way more often than most people do.
Yeah. And then at the same time, unfortunately, everybody doesn't have a building biologist on their doorstep, and
yeah.
And really, it is something where it's better if he comes out with his professional meters. So there's things that you can do. You can maybe work with him via telephone or Skype and work things out that way. But it is better if he comes in with the professional meters. And for me, the best is really to go word of mouth. But certainly, if failing that, then looking at reputable institutes, which you referenced. But I want to just address the situation we've talked in a general sense, and then you've got people, there are people who are watching today who are electrically hypersensitive, or to use another term, they have electromagnetic field intolerance syndrome. And so this is really, it's all what you've talked about and much more, because we have to take this to another level, because hypersensitivity is a bit like, for electromagnetic fields, a bit like people who are gluten intolerant and they're walking along down the street and they walk past the baker's shop and then they break out in a cold sweat because they've, they smell a baguette. And it's a bit like that. It's just, if you're not electrically hypersensitive, it's difficult really to appreciate exactly what it is, because it is, it's just 24/7. And obviously there's different degrees. But for some people, it's extremely debilitating. And literally, they cannot go into places. They cannot go, and I've experienced this, going down the shopping mall, going down to friends who've got the Wi-Fi and the cordless phones and so on. So, yeah, so if you could just address that, so people that are beyond sort of saying, well, yeah, just get an EMF consultant. Somebody who's watching this, what tips can you give to them who's looking for solutions that, somebody that is hypersensitive?
Sure. The number one thing would be to consider yourself, and it's very unfortunate. Let me tell you a story. My wife, Jen, we've been together 8 years and a half. And, oh my God, yeah, I realize that's not so bad. That's a lot. And 8 years ago, she told me, well, I'm allergic to milk and dairy. And I saw her eating cheese over and over again. And what she gets is tummy ache, and she got them. And she still had like dairy-based frozen dessert, and she got tummy ache. And I was like, well, Jen, I don't think it's it's just a little bit. I'm taking antacids and then it passes. So she didn't fully accept her condition. It took her years, probably 3 or 4 years after we were together. She said, well, you know what? I think I'm allergic to dairy, Nick. I'm going to stop all dairy. Like, I don't have it. And now she feels better. Like her health has gotten better because of it. But it was a hard process because, let's face it, while cheese is delicious, like I'm slightly intolerant, and I could have it from time to time, but we don't have it at home. I don't encourage it. So if you're sensitive to signals, it's very hard to accept that you should have no signals, because it's not convenient what I'm telling you. If you're literally, like you mentioned, let's say a celiac person that has a strong autoimmunity to gluten, and he can even smell the freshly baked bread and feel sick, you gotta stop eating bread. So if you say, oh, well, I'm just going to have a slice here, a slice there, feel a little bit sick, but then the next day I'm okay, I'm just a little bit hungover. No, you're triggering your immune system into feeling worse and worse and worse. And unfortunately, you're teaching your immune system the wrong thing. Attack, attack, attack. And you never have this long period of calm to restore your health. The problem is, what I'm telling you right now as a person sensitive is not convenient. That might mean that your environment, if you live in the middle of New York City and you're feeling hypersensitive, it might mean that New York City is not the place where you'll heal, right? So it means that you might have to relocate and work at a distance, try to keep your job and maybe work 3-4 days outside the home, or let's say from home, where it's a place that is shielded. But again, you cannot necessarily live in New York City and stay in your apartment that is just a bunker. You'll want to go out and then you'll get exposed. So you have to figure out what is at one point you can be in an environment that's just clean enough that your symptoms will start to get better, that your health will start to improve. And if it's not improving right now, you got to think about your environment, not adding another supplement, not seeing another professional necessarily, even though it's important. It's the environment. And if it's not clean enough, it's just like a celiac who keeps eating just a little bit of bread. Just here, just a bite. It's no big deal. It might be a big deal for your body. So that's a very hard thing to cope with and to accept, that you might have to move in a cleaner environment, if not for good, for a long period of time until you can recover. And that's your own experiment. That's not, I cannot tell you if it's 2 days, a week, a month, 5 years, all your life. It's just that you have to consider that maybe your environment is still making you sick. And then the second thing I'm going to say in a very practical standpoint is grounding in nature, walking barefoot in a natural environment, and probably not New York City. So maybe going camping, going outside in very clean environments, and kind of dumping this extra electricity and having your body's natural electricity leveled up. And there's a lot of science. It sounds a little bit woo-woo right now, but there's a lot of science behind grounding and a lot of experiments that have shown tremendous health benefits. And I think part of the reason is simply that your body natural EMFs get equalized. And that it's great for your immunity. And let's say that it will put your recovery on the supercharged mode. So it's very important to have this practice. So going in nature, swimming in the sea, swimming in the lake, walking in the forest, walking barefoot on the grass, but in an environment that's clean, not necessarily in a downtown area where you find a 2x2 patch of grass and you stand there. It might be beneficial, but again, the air is very dirty, so it's always hard to tell, right? It's like jogging in the middle of downtown London that I've heard is so dirty when it comes to smog. Is it beneficial or is it harmful? Well, sometimes the public authorities say you shouldn't do exercise outside. So it's a catch-22 sometimes. Am I helping my health by jogging, or am I breathing in all this black smoke, right? So just the practice of grounding, I've heard great things, and usually people feel less sensitive. They feel that if they had an overexposure to EMFs, they feel better right off the bat when they ground. And I would do it preferably in nature, preferably outside the home, and preferably outside these dirty environments.
Yeah, and there is a lot of science on this grounding or earthing. But having said that, it's not black and white. Unfortunately, because nothing in the EMF world is black and white, and that's what makes it, again, so complicated, because there are just, it seems, really, you do have to listen to your body. That's the most important thing, because there are situations where people are grounding, even in countryside settings, even out, in the sticks, and they're not, it's not working. But is it not working because they're on detox? Is it like a 2 or 3 week period that they have to go through? That can happen too, a bit like with the dirty electricity filters. You sometimes get that when you introduce these filters, and then you get people saying, well, no, I feel worse. But how long did you try the filters for? Because if you kept them on for 2-3 days, that could just be your body detoxing. So you do have to be a little bit patient on this, and listen, look at the science, but listen to your body. Listen to your body most importantly. And just to come back on what you were saying there about the how important it is, EMF protection and avoidance, for people that are hypersensitive, to go that step further. And it may be massively inconvenient. It may mean even not being able to work for a certain period of time, but obviously it is your health, and you do have to do what you have to do for yourself. Put number one first, because if you don't put number one first, you can't help anybody else. You can't help your wife. You can't help your kids. And that's one of the things which quite a few of the functional medicine doctors I've spoken to have said, well, if you're not looking, you can do all the detox and all the be as careful as you like on the nutrition and do this, workout and all this. But if you're not looking at the EMF question, then you're really kind of shooting yourself in the foot. So it is fundamental. It is an absolute cornerstone of health. And so, it's been fantastic speaking to you. Any last quick comments here before we sign off today?
Well, sure. Just one thing that you mentioned, take it one step at a time. If you're brand new to EMFs and you're listening to, let's say, this entire summit series or a few interviews, it will be too much. It will be overwhelming. Just take it one step at a time. Decide to change one habit. Is it airplane mode? Is it the Wi-Fi? Choose something and feel it. Feel it. Oh, I sleep a little bit better, and go from there. Don't try to change everything all at once. Necessarily, if you're sensitive, you gotta do more. You gotta take action and listen to every interview. This is going to be your I think your best resource to study and to listen to again and again, because unfortunately the medical system will not necessarily help, and even most of functional medicine will not necessarily help. So listen to the interview with functional medicine practitioners who understand EMFs, and that's a rare feat. So try to even get a hold of some of these doctors if you want to be treated, because they understand your condition.
Yeah, great advice, Nick. Where can people find out more about what you do?
Sure. So you can find me on, and now I'm gonna I'm gonna put pressure for me to put it up. You can find me on nickpino.com. It's gonna be my new website. It's gonna be up by November. Fingers crossed. If it's redirecting you to a page that says in progress, well, it's still good. You're going to be able to get resources from me. Another thing is just my book, The Non-Tinfoil Guide to EMFs. You can find it on Amazon everywhere, or just emfbook.com. And finally, if you're a health practitioner and want to learn about my course, which goes deeper than any other certification out there to learn about electromagnetic field in your practice, it's called Electrosmog RX, and found at electrosmogrx.com.
Listen, it's been fascinating talking to you. The other thing I can say is that your book is really funny.
Thank you.
Like when we interview you, you don't tell jokes. You're actually fairly serious, but your book is not that serious. But your book is really funny. It's like, and yet it's not lighthearted. So honestly, I just want to say that because it's the only book I've read on EMFs which has kind of made me laugh so much. And it's kind
Thank you.
He's laughing from a viewpoint of, that's right. It is crazy. He's just laughing because it's so crazy. It's so crazy what we're doing to ourselves. So Nick Pino, thanks you so much for being part of the EMF Health Summit.
My pleasure, Lloyd.
And for all of you who've joined us today, thank you for being part of this movement. Stay tuned for my next session. My name is Lloyd Borrell. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.